Hello, my name is Reginald McGill, and I was born June 23rd, 1990. And today we will be talking about a brief history of June 1990. 1990 was the year of the horse, and a lot of history was made in June of that year. June started off with the blockbuster release of Total Recall, which grossed $119 million and was the number one movie that month. Now let's move on to summer music releases with the release of Mariah Carey's self-titled debut album on June 12th. And on that same day, Madonna released the single Hanky Panky. And also on that day, R&B singer Keith Sweat released the LP I'll Give All My Love to You. And on June 21st, hard rock band Poison released the Flesh and Blood LP. And hip-hop group Public Enemy released the single Brother Gonna Work It, but the date is not given. And now let's move on to headlining sport events that happened that month. On June 4th, LA Dodger Ramon Martinez strikes out 18 Atlanta Braves. And on June 10th, the Detroit Pistons beat the Portland Trail Blazers for the first time since 1974. And 4 days later, on June 14th, Detroit beat Portland 92-90 in Game 5 of the NBA Finals for back-to-back titles, and the MVP of that game was Isaiah Thomas. The celebration of the Detroit championship led to a violent riot within the city, and this was confirmed by my mother, who was pregnant with me at the time, but was safe at home. And finally, on June 27th, Jose Canseco signs a $4.7 million per year contract with the Oakland A's. And now let's move on to events that led to widespread discussion that month. On June 4th, Dr. Jack Kevorkian assists an Oregon woman to commit suicide, which led to a widespread talk on the right to die. And on June 7th, Michael Jackson entered St. John's Hospital and Health Center for chest pains after a dance rehearsal. And June was a tough month for Michael Jackson because 2 days later, on June 9th, he was hospitalized with inflamed rib cartilage in California. And in international news, on June 5th, South African troops rushed Nelson Mandela's home. And on June 7th, South African President F.W. de Klerk lifts the 4-year state of emergency. In February 1990, a 30-year ban was lifted on anti-apartheid organizations, which led to the freeing of political prisoners. This meant that Nelson Mandela was released from prison and issued a passport. And later in June of that year, on June 13th, Nelson and his wife, Winnie Mandela, was welcomed in NYC. On June 16th, Nelson and Winnie visited Amsterdam as part of their European tour. And on June 20th, Mandela lands in New York City to begin the U.S. tour. On June 21st, Nelson Mandela dons a Yankee hat at Yankee Stadium and proclaims, "I am a Yankee." And on the next day, June 22nd, Nelson Mandela addressed the United Nations Special Committee, urging them to maintain the same consensus they had achieved when it adopted the Declaration on Apartheid. And in other historic events that happened that month, on June 11th, the Supreme Court says that the law prohibiting desecration of the United States flag is unconstitutional, which led to the U.S. House of Representatives vote of 254 to 177 on June 21st to stop the flag burning, which doesn't pass. And on that same day, New York Zodiac killer kills his fourth victim, Larry Parham. In lighter news, on June 16th, the popular song "You Can't Touch This" by artist MC Hammer peaks at number 8 on Billboard music charts. And on June 21st, Little Richard receives a star on the Hollywood's Walk of Fame. And on June 22nd, Florida passes a law prohibiting wearing thong bathing suits. And I guess it was an attempt for Florida to clean up its act because earlier that month, on June 10th, the rap group 2 Live Crew was arrested in Florida for obscenity during a rap concert. In television news, on June 22nd, Adam Sandler joined the cast of Saturday Night Live. And on my birthday, June 23rd, Moldova declares its independence. And finally, on that same day, police find marijuana at Chuck Berry's home. So the history of June 1990 had hot summer music releases. The history of June 1990 had hot summer music releases and international debate on the apartheid struggle in South Africa. And Detroit, and over here in Michigan, Detroit won a championship that led to a violent riot within the city. So this just goes to show that June 1990 had historic events that took place and helped shape and helped set the tone for the rest of the decade. I am happy to learn about the history of June 1990 because it gave me an appreciation for my birth month and helped give me perspective on the world that I came into. Thank you and have a nice day. And this is my audience made of my wife and my brother-in-law.